Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Line Movers College Football Podcast. With me tonight, Ian Robbins, Trey Edge are my college football guys. I'm David Dorman. Once again, welcome in to the Line Movers Podcast. Please follow us along for college football and all sports on Twitter at _LM Network. Once again, on Twitter at _LM Network. Welcome in, Ian. Welcome in, Trey. How we doing?
Doing great, man. Ready for another big weekend of college football. Great, ever-changing landscape, certainly week to week.
Yeah, definitely. Really excited to see what this Saturday brings us. Expect the unexpected. Can't wait for it.
Big game, big slate. Before we get into the games, we're going to have our feature games. We're going to go rapid fire. But let's go over the college football landscape and more specifically into the playoff look. Last week, we went team by team. I'm not going to go through it all the way, but let's just look at what's going on here at the top, guys. Georgia won, held form, looks good. We'll put them aside. Number 2, though, Alabama struggled, escaped at home against a very weak, mediocre LSU team. 3rd, Michigan State, Sparty, loser. 4, Oregon struggled. It was a rainstorm in Washington, but they did win. Gets interesting at 5. Ohio State went to Nebraska, struggled, but pulled it out. Everyone's favorite topic, including mine, Cincinnati. The committee put them at 6 last week. Interesting because everyone's going to say they struggled against a terrible team. I'm not so sure that's a terrible team in Tulsa. Cincinnati again at 6. Michigan sitting at 7. We're going to get into them a little in a breakdown. And 8, Oklahoma, who had the week off. Ian, what do you see here?
It's interesting. It feels like we're doing a cycle, and make sure you go back to how things were, and like you can look at the playoff rankings in 2 perspectives. You can say, all right, what has a team done? How have they looked on the field? What's their power rating in Vegas, which I think should be a topic brought up. What would the point spreads be potentially? Because we're looking at, that may be why Alabama is ranked where they are, because their power rating from a point spread perspective is so high, but the gap seems to be big. And I don't think necessarily the rankings line up with where the power ratings are. And, the biggest takeaway I have, and I said this last week, and I firmly believe this, is there's a lot of football left to be played. We can expect the unexpected. We saw Michigan State go down, not as a huge favorite, but we saw them go down. Ohio State almost went down. Oregon's got tough games left. Ohio State's got tough games left. Big Ten has some tough games. Cincinnati has some big games ahead of them. I think they will be able to prove some things down the road. I would hope things work out. Alabama struggled. They have some big games ahead. Football, there's a lot of football left to be played, and that's a big thing. I think taking a deep dive into these ratings in November 1st before Thanksgiving is really, really hard to do. And I think you continue to look at what do the power ratings say, what are the strengths of these teams. Eventually they will play out, because Michigan State wasn't a very good team, or wasn't a number 3 undefeated team. And we saw that play out. And I think you will see that for some of these teams as we go on down the road.
Trey, what do you see in the playoff situation here?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Ian said, especially the fact that, just look at what happened the first weekend after, the playoff rankings came out. We just mentioned Michigan State losing. I wasn't a believer that Michigan State was one of the top 4 teams in the country. Just my opinion. They'd beaten everybody on their schedule, but I just didn't believe it. 1 week later, they're defeated, not a factor anymore. Cincinnati, that whole thing, I just have a feeling it's all going to take care of itself. I hope we don't get in that situation where, Cincinnati's on the outside looking in if they run the table. I've always wanted an 8-team playoff in this thing. We can get into all that stuff at another time, but I just think there's too much of a chance for a Cincinnati, a non-P5 school, to get in there. You've got to do everything right, and then you've got to count on others to lose. And that's not really what the game is about. You shouldn't have to count on what others do. It's what you do. And they can only do and beat everybody on their schedule. Every team's going to struggle. You look at Oklahoma sitting back there at 8, and what they have left on their schedule. At Baylor this week, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. If they run the table, as much as we all wait on Oklahoma to choke every year, they're good. They're gonna be in there if they run the table. That's a tough closing stretch. Ohio State, Michigan. We've just got such good quality football games left that I plan on it playing out on the field, and that we're not sitting here in the Final Four rankings with a kind of a, objective thing from guys who don't even watch the games, voting on this thing, and we're all sitting around going, I just don't get it. I hate that feeling. College football doesn't need that. It needs I personally think it needs an undefeated team like Cincinnati. It lends some excitement to it. I'm ready to see some new blood, but I hope it just plays itself out on the field.
It would be an absolute shame if Cincinnati does run the table. Everyone has a loss, maybe except Georgia, and they don't get in.
Right.
That would be awful.
2 years in a row. 2 years in a row.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to your point, when these non-power schools, what do they have to do? They have to have that ranking high enough coming into the season that they don't have to jump everybody. So they did it last year. They did all the heavy lifting last year. Then they're still docking them this year. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah. Bigger picture issues that we'd have to have a lot longer discussion about. I think everybody's got an opinion about this, and let's just see how November plays out. Let's see where we stand when we get to Thanksgiving.
Agreed. I'm pulling for the Bearcats. I don't think I've ever said that.
Me neither. I sound like a Cincinnati fan. I'm not. I'm just for the little guy. All right. Moving into our featured games. Let's start off in the Big 12. Oklahoma is going down to Waco to take on the Baylor Bears. Oklahoma should be fresh. They were off a bye last week. Interesting, Baylor had a big opportunity, but blew it last week to TCU. Now Baylor's at home and only getting 5.5. This line in one of your games just doesn't smell right. Seems a little low. Sooners at Baylor. Baylor getting 5.5. Ian.
Yeah, not only just the line, you look at that result last week and you say, was Baylor looking ahead? I think so, but how you can't be looking ahead. You have one loss. You're Baylor. You're not one of the traditionals. You have to do everything you can to keep yourself in the picture, and you just can't afford to look ahead. And losing to a TCU team that just lost their coach of a long, long time, and maybe that just gave them a little extra boost of energy that they needed. But maybe Baylor just said, "Oh, TCU just lost Coach Patterson. Maybe we could take the foot off the gas a little bit, cruise into Oklahoma." Didn't work out for them. Now they're really got their backs up against the walls. Now they got the pressure on, and now Coach Aranda's got to figure out what he's going to do with his squad to get them ready for Oklahoma. And Oklahoma's coming in off the bye. We saw them correct themselves a little bit after that Kansas game. And, that, again, could have been just we're playing Kansas, let's sleepwalk. You had freshmen leading the team now with Caleb Williams and Mario. Caleb Williams at quarterback, and he's certainly looking all lines to part with Coach Riley helping him out there. And maybe Oklahoma's a different team that we saw. Maybe they're just a team that skates by, finds a way to win, and ends up undefeated. Oklahoma, we're going to learn about who Oklahoma is these next couple of weeks because they certainly play the class of the Big 12, and we'll get another one. As Trey mentioned earlier, they got Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. Another interesting nugget about this game with Baylor is they just lost their associate head coach. They didn't lose him, but their associate head coach, defensive coordinator, Joe McGuire, who's a holdover from when Matt Rule was there. He's been there for 5 years. He just took the job as Texas Tech's new head coach this week, like today. This is Monday that we record this. And that's big news for an Oklahoma game week. He's going to finish out the season with Baylor. So he's not leaving for Texas Tech yet. But now you get in early. You make an early hire because you want to get the jump start on recruiting. He's coached high school in Texas before. That has to be part of the decision. So it's really hard to do two. It's really hard to have one job in coaching major college football. Now he's got to kind of have two, juggle responsibilities of calling a defense for Baylor, which is their strength, against Lincoln Riley, who's maybe one of the best offensive minds, maybe the best offensive mind in the country. and think about his new job at Texas Tech, his first head coaching job, where he wants to get a jump start, know the players, see who's back, try to get recruiting going on. It's just interesting timing that this would happen. And congrats to Coach McGuire. He's worked hard. He earns that head coaching job, and he wants to stay on with his team to see where they can go. They've got a potential for, a Fiesta Bowl bid, maybe a Cotton Bowl bid, or a, New Year's Day Bowl. So where is that? Baylor's, from a game perspective, Baylor's going to need their running back, Abraham Smith, to really control the game for them. And they're relying on that Dave Aranda defense to prepare for Oklahoma's attack. And they, should be prepared. They have the players, they have the coaching. Abraham Smith, we saw how Bijan Robinson really controlled the game against Oklahoma with Texas. That's what Baylor's going to need to control the game, slow it down, bring it to their pace, and force Caleb Williams to go on the road, go into a hostile environment, and force him to win the game. Ultimately, I do think this Oklahoma team is just a little bit too talented. I do think that they, people are looking to doubt them. I think you're going to see them going against Baylor. Finally, they're out on the road against a ranked team. Let's jump against Oklahoma. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Oklahoma here. I think Coach Riley is one of the best at what he does. I think that making the move to Caleb Williams has gotten him a little bit comfortable. So for this home stretch, to see what he's got. And I think Oklahoma is going to come up top. My key thing is my big thing. If you're watching this game's going to be early. If Oklahoma jumps out to an early touchdown lead, maybe 2 touchdown lead, and Baylor's got to play catch up, that's not good. That's not what Baylor wants. That's not what Baylor's going to want to do. So then I think Oklahoma's going to pound them a little bit. If Baylor keeps this game close in the first half, they're live, especially at home. And that's what you want to watch for the first quarter is. If Oklahoma jumps out to a lead, I think it's lights out. But if Baylor can keep it close, keep that belief in, keep the crowd in the game, they're going to be live to the end.
Trey, Sooners, Bears in Waco. Bears are getting 5, total of 63. What do you hear? What do you see, Trey?
Yeah, and I can't really disagree with anything Ian said there. It's interesting. You look at this quarterback for Oklahoma since he has come in and taken over that offense, 71% completion rate, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception, also rushed for 4 downs. I mean, he's changed this team and, taken over for a guy who was at one time the Heisman leading candidate is Spencer Rattler. You just don't see that very often. It's been an incredible story in Norman this year. And if you look at how this game matches up, it's really interesting. Oklahoma, high-scoring team, 42 points a game. That's 5th in the country in scoring offense. 17th in the country in passing yards, 295. Well, where is Baylor weak? They're weak in their pass defense. Their lack of pass rush, they give up 237 a game through the air. On the flip side, the matchup is kind of what you expect from a run-heavy Baylor team. They're the 11th leading rushing team in the country. And just so happens Oklahoma, you don't really think about Oklahoma in this way. They only give up 111 yards rushing a game. That's 16th in the country. When I think of Oklahoma, I think, 52-45, that type of game. But they've actually played really well against the run, and that's Baylor's strength. If you look at what's happened to Baylor, the loss last week to TCU was devastating for their hopes in the Big 12. They've got left on their schedule Kansas and Texas Tech. You heard Ian say, what does Oklahoma have left? Baylor this week, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. Everything's in front of Oklahoma, but it's 3 tough games. And it begins this week. What's changed for Baylor now is instead of big dreams about the Big 12, this is their season. Those dreams of the Big 12 championship are gone. So what can you do now? Texas Tech and Kansas State still out there. This is your season, and you have Oklahoma at home. This is your chance to make your stand and make this year something really, really special. They're 5-0 against the spread, the last 5 at home. I tell you, it's tough. It's a spread that is, right there. And I think all of us have this kind of notion where we go, okay, when's Oklahoma going to lay the egg? You anticipate that every year. I don't disagree with Ian in that I think Oklahoma may be different this year. I think the quarterback change ignited them in some way. I don't even think it was necessarily planned, but it's done something with that team that's lit a fire underneath them. And I think their defense is better than it has been. But I'm going to go against Ian here. I'm just going to take Baylor not to win, not to pull the upset, to keep this within a field goal, 35, 31, somewhere in there. Because, again, I have a little bit of built-in wait on Oklahoma to fall thing going on. And this is Baylor's season. I do think Oklahoma wins. I think we're at that point of the season where we get some topsy-turvy results and some really close games. We saw it last weekend. I think this may be Oklahoma's weekend to win, but to struggle.
Great breakdown. The Line Movers Network is rolling into SEC country. Texas A&M is going into Oxford to take on Kiffin's Ole Miss Rebels. Texas A&M's fresh off a great home victory against Auburn, and the defense was awesome. They're going into Ole Miss this week. A&M opened as a 1-point favorite. The Sharps look to be on A&M because it's up to about 2.5. The total, interesting enough, opened around 58.5, is knocked down now to around 55. So Texas A&M's going into Ole Miss. A&M's now a 2.5-point favorite, total of 55. What do we see, Trey?
This is an interesting game. How about A&M? I mean, you talk about a team that now is, borderline top 10 in the country. And honestly, you don't think much about them. Once they beat Alabama, they arrived on the scene. But we think back to how this season played out. They lost to Arkansas 20-10. They lost to Mississippi State, and everybody just kind of forgot about them. Then they beat Alabama. They've won 4 in a row since defeating, including that win over Alabama. They beat Auburn last weekend. This is a team that's turned their season around. And it's interesting, again, the stereotypes you take of teams. We all have images in our head of what teams are in college football. High-scoring teams. We talked about Oklahoma. A&M, what do you think of? Manziel and all these guys, that have been there playing for the Aggies. They're the second-ranked scoring defense in the country. That's not normally what I think about when I think of A&M football. But you look at what they did last weekend. To Auburn, held the War Eagles to a field goal, and they also have the 8th leading rushing offense in the country. But it's about that defense. Question mark for them, quarterback Zach, I hope I said this right, Calzada was hurt last week. I think his shoulder was dislocated, popped out. He did practice today, so he looks like he's a go, but that's something to keep your eye on. If he is out, that changes everything. Flip it over to Ole Miss, 7-2. They sit 3-2 in the SEC West. Again, what do you think about when you think Ole Miss? You think 52-51 against Arkansas. That's what you think. But it's really interesting. If you look at their last 5 games, you've got that one that was 103 total points. Then listen to these total points the last 4. 57, 48, 51, 41. 27-14, right, over Liberty last weekend. You would assume they'd score. Now, Liberty's a good program. You'd assume they'd roll up 50. Their scores have been coming down as the season has progressed because they have so many injuries. Their wide receiver, Mingo's out for the year. Leading receiver, Dontario Drummond, was out last week. He's questionable this week. Those are the 2 top guys. And I don't think Matt Corral's been healthy for maybe 3 weeks. They're not the same team. And it shows in the number of offensive points that they're putting up this last month of the season. So I look at this game. I look at momentum. I look at a team in Mississippi that I just don't think is healthy. Do I think they'll put up a fight? Games at home? Sure. I mean, I actually, I like Kiffin. I like what he's done with that program already. But I love the way A&M is playing. It's their big challenge to go play an Ole Miss offense that lights up the scoreboard in everybody's minds. Stats aren't showing it the last 3 weeks, but that's what we think. That's what we know about Ole Miss. I love A&M. I love the way they're playing. And the one thing you can always trust is a good defense. And I'll take the second leading scoring defense in the country to keep Mississippi under wraps a little bit, and A&M does enough to win this one and win it by that field goal, which will cover the spread.
Defense travels, right, Troy?
Yes, sir, buddy.
Ian, Aggies, Rebels in Oxford. What do you got?
Great breakdown. A lot of the points I agree with there. I'll touch briefly on those, but set this game up. This game actually has some significant meaning. A&M had that springboard after Alabama, but they're still, both these teams actually are still in line for a chance at the SEC West title. The SEC West is very competitive, especially at the top, and Alabama is not a shoo-in to get there. Alabama does have that loss to A&M, which means A&M would hold a tiebreaker over Alabama. Alabama's got that little Iron Bowl at the end against a team that's been playing well in Auburn over there. And, we saw Alabama struggle last week. They're not invincible. And that just reminded us that, oh, wait, some bigger things at play here in this A&M Ole Miss game, and 2 top 15, 2 top 20 programs. And there's an SEC West title on the line here. And A&M was a preseason top 5, top 10 team, struggled early, had some injuries, kind of overcame them, used that win over Alabama, springboard them, and they found a way to win with defense and get the ball in their 2 best players' hands, which just happens to be their 2 running backs, Isaiah Spiller, Devin Achane. And they're proving that this is a winning formula. Defense is going to win in the SEC West this year, and this is how they're going to win. SEC really across the board last year. Trey, you were talking about, we think Texas A&M, Johnny Manziel. Well, let's go back to that team. Let's think about who was the defensive player of the year on that team. Myles Garrett.
Yep.
Who's the best defensive player in the NFL, arguably right now. Myles Garrett. Manziel's out of the league. So it's kind of funny that we go back and that's what we think of, but this is really what the reality is, kind of a microcosm of what Texas A&M is right now. Going back to Ole Miss, totally right. Their points have been going down, the injuries there. That was a very emotional game for them last week. It's Liberty. It's in the middle of the SEC season. Winning by 13, covering that 9-point spread that a lot of people were on Liberty for. Beating Hugh Freeze was a big deal for the Mississippi program. Was a big deal for Lane Kiffin, was a big deal for some of those. Like that was something that was a little bit internal motivation. And I think they wanted to get by because Matt Corral is hurt. I don't think Ole Miss could beat A&M without Matt Corral. Let's just put that. If he's hurt, if he's anyway hurt, that's going to really, really limit their chances because they're guy who was in a quarterback competition with them. You talked about the receiver injuries. John Reese Plumlee, he's now their leading receiver. He made the position change because he's a great athlete. He's a great player. He needed to. Kind of similar to what Ryan Tannehill did when he was at A&M. But John Reese Plumlee is now playing receiver for Ole Miss, and Matt Corral is hurt, and their top receivers are hurt, and they're just not moving the ball the way they've been able to. And I don't think they'll be able to play with A&M if they can't move the ball. I think they're going to get beat up. And what's going to travel more? Freshman quarterback going on the road, heavy pass team. That's hard to go on the road for. But veteran team, great defense, running game, running attack. Coach Fisher's got A&M rolling. I think they can play on the road a little bit. And I do like a low-scoring game here. I do think it's going to be a slugfest, or not a slug. Yeah, they're going to beat each other up. It's going to be a physical game. I like A&M, I like the under. I think they will skate by with a win there.
Both my guys on A&M and the under. Great breakdown. Let's move into the rapid fire portion of the podcast tonight. Let's start in the Big Ten. Michigan is going to Happy Valley to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions. We have a favorite flip here. Michigan opened as a 2.5, 2-point favorite. The Sharps are pounding Penn State because Penn State is now a 1-point favorite. Michigan in Penn State, we have a total of 48.5, and Penn State's now a 1-point favorite. Ian, what do you see here?
Yeah, it's rapid fire breakdown in this game. Interesting line move, unranked team, favorite over a top 10 team. That says everything to me. Clifford looks healthy. Dotson looks very good. I think early line movement shows Sharps are favoring Penn State. I'm also favoring Penn State. I think low scoring. I think Clifford's healthy. Penn State might have more talent, actually, and I think they'll win the game.
Trey?
2 of the top 20 scoring defenses in the country. That's a great matchup to watch. I agree with you on the line movement. Always tells you something, and here's just a little stat I'll throw out there. Michigan, 0-6 against the spread, not winning, against the spread versus teams with winning records. So take that, combined with the spread moving toward Penn State, and yes, the game being in Happy Valley, I'm rolling with Ian, and I'm going to take the Nittany Lions as well.
Both my guys on Penn State. Next, let's go back to SEC land. Mississippi State is going into Auburn. Auburn opened as a 4-point favorite, up a tick to 5. The current total from 53 and a half on the open down to 50. Mississippi State at Auburn, Auburn -5. Trey, how do you see it?
Yeah, Auburn's got a rebound coming off that loss last week, getting beat 20-3 by A&M. It's a tough turnaround, but I think this is a get-right week for Auburn. They've got Alabama a couple weeks from now. I'm not a big believer in this Mississippi State team. They've been up and down all year, sitting at 5-4. I think Auburn's good enough on the defensive side of the ball not to let Mike Leach run up 500 yards in the air. So I just think this is a get-right week for Auburn, and I'm actually going to take them to win by a touchdown.
Ian?
Yeah, look at Auburn. It's pretty simple for me. Bo Nix on the road, go against them. Bo Nix at home, play on them. And Bo Nix in Auburn, they're at home, coming off that loss. Let's play on them. I think Auburn's got talent. Bo Nix plays, it's tremendous. The split's just unbelievable. And Auburn's well coached, and they're a good program. They've had a very good season. Just on the road, they can't get the wins. At home, they can. Then they get the win.
Both of you had very simple stats there, but sometimes we break down. We overthink these games. Sometimes it's simple and just go with what you're, that easy little.
Yeah.
Back to the Big Ten. Minnesota off a home loss to the Fighting Illini of Illinois are going into Iowa. Iowa has been a train wreck and hasn't looked good since the beginning of the season when everyone was hyping them. So Minnesota, the Golden Gophers, are going into Iowa. Iowa opened as a 7-point favorite, a full touchdown and an extra point, down a tick to 6. So Iowa's favorite by 6. Another Big Ten total here, opened at 37.5, down to 37. Minnesota at Iowa. Iowa 6-point favorite. Trey.
Boy, another 37 or so point total. You just always want to say I'm sprinkling some on the over just because I have to. Stunning loss by Minnesota to me last week. Yeah, they had won 4 in a row, started to really put things together, and then you lose to Illinois. It just a shocking loss to me. Iowa somehow keeps winning. Not impressive over Northwestern last week. These scores, the last 3, 29 points, 34 points, 31. It's built for a low-scoring game. Because of that, if the points are 35, 36, 37, I have a hard time getting to a touchdown difference between these two teams. So because of that and because of the spread, I'm going to roll with the Gophers to keep it close, and I'll take the 6.
Yeah, I really can't see how this game is above 6 points. Minnesota is a clear look-ahead spot. It's a flat spot. You go to play Illinois. We saw it before. Penn State went down to Illinois and lost the game. And, Minnesota, it's a flat spot. You playing in Illinois, it's a tough play. It's a tough road when you got the Big Ten West just staring you down. And, credit Illinois. They've gotten a couple nice wins out of it, but I just think it's been a flat scheduling spot. I think Minnesota bounces back. I think Iowa – some of their turnover luck that they had against Iowa State and Penn State maybe has come a little bit, back the other way. And their luck might not be as much as it was earlier in the year with the turnovers. And I don't know why it's already moving down. I'd jump on it. I think it's going to move down a little bit more and then maybe tick up on game day. I think Minnesota actually wins this game outright. I think they're just a better team than Iowa. They just had a bad loss. And that was the aberration game. They get right here. Take it against Iowa, set up a nice showdown at the end of the year with Wisconsin for that Big Ten West.
Great stuff. Moving to the ACC, Trey's neck of the woods. Huge game for both teams. Didn't think we'd be saying that 6 weeks ago, but it is a huge game in the ACC this week. The Wolfpack, NC State, is going into Wake Forest. Wake Forest opened at about a 2-point favorite, sitting there maybe up a little to 2.5. Here come the ACC crazy totals. Wake Forest didn't play much D last week versus North Carolina. The total opened at 71.5, but it's down to 66.5. Again, Wake Forest is 2.5-point favorite. Let's start with Ian.
Line movement for the total tells you that at 71 is way too much for NC State's defense. They've been playing defense all year. I do think Wake Forest bounces back. I think Hartman is good. I like their coach Clausen. He's a very good coach. I think Hartman's very good. That wasn't actually a conference loss last week against North Carolina. It was a non-conference game that they had scheduled. But this is for the ACC Coastal. And I do think that Wake is able to come out with a win. I think that the scoring, I think that the scoring will be a little bit lower, but I do think Wake escapes with a win here.
Right?
It is a classic matchup. Wake averages 44 points a game. That's third in the country. State gives up 16. That's sixth in the country. It's just a great matchup of styles. Great offense against great defense. Quickly, State has not played in a game that's gone over this total where it is right now, 66.5 in any game this year. Every game they've played, NC State's gone under the 66.5. The public's going to be all over this over after Wake and Carolina put up 113 points. But to the pick, I personally think Dave Clawson at Wake Forest is one of the best coaches in the country, getting what he gets done with less than a lot of teams have. I love Wake Forest to bounce back here. They've won 3 out of the last 4 against NC State. I like it under that field goal, and I'll take the Demon Deacons by at least 3.
Great. My college football guys, Ian Robbins, Trey Edge, they always bring it. Make sure you're following along. Listen to the picks. Take your notes because these guys know what they're talking about. Again, you've been listening to the Line Movers College Football Podcast. Another huge week of football coming up. Again, my guys, my college football experts, for Ian Robbins, for Trey Edge, I'm David Dorman. Please follow our network on Twitter at @the_LM Network. Follow along on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Just punch in Line Movers Network. Come to our website, brand new website. It's really cool, thelinemovers.net. You can, we also have some cool gear. Some of the guys are wearing tonight on the website. Come along, purchase, support the group. Once again, another fantastic week. For Ian Robbins, Trey Edge, I'm David Dorman. I'll give the guys the last word tonight. Take it away, boys.
Cash them tickets. Good luck this week. Craziness is going to happen.
They're going to be crazy games every weekend from here on out. Hopefully we covered a couple of them. Some dogs are going to bark again this weekend, guarantee it.
Good luck, everyone.